The day I became the most hated man in Lakeside Heights was also the day my wife got the cops called on her by a woman who had no idea she was dialing the police on the actual police chief. Her name, Victoria Harlow, a devoted member of the HOA board armed with a clipboard and a smile that looked like it had been laminated. That morning, she was pounding on our front gate like she had a warrant demanding immediate access to our old barn for community inspection. My wife, Jenna, still in her pajamas, coffee in hand, politely said, "No warrant, no entry." Without missing a beat, Victoria stepped back, pulled out her phone, and smiled like she'd just won a courtroom battle. "I'm reporting a resident for non-compliance," she told the dispatcher. "I need immediate assistance." What Victoria didn't know was that the woman she was reporting was the brand new police chief of the entire district, my wife. We'd only lived in Lakeside Heights for 2 days when we met her. Victoria Harlow didn't knock like a neighbor. She marched up our driveway like she owned the zip code, high heels clicking like a countdown pearl necklace glinting in the sun. Clipboard. Of course. Sunglasses oversized. Smile. Cold-pressed. "Mr. Blake," she said without blinking, "your barn violates 3 aesthetic standards. It's too old, too rustic, and, frankly, too rural for this community." I blinked. She had said it like we'd brought in a radioactive silo, not a 1950s family barn. "We just moved in," I offered. "It's part of the property's history." "Well, history doesn't match the neighborhood's vision," she replied, already noting something on her clipboard like she was logging evidence. Jenna watched from the porch. She didn't say a word. But I saw it in her eyes. This wasn't about a barn. And it definitely wasn't just about aesthetic violations. It was the beginning of something bigger. The next time Victoria showed up, she didn't even bother with pleasantries. She stood just outside our front steps, same outfit, same clipboard like she hadn't moved since last time. Only this time she had back up a man in khakis with a tape measurer and a drone hovering behind him like it had a search warrant. "I hope you don't mind," she said sweetly. "We're just doing some preliminary measurements for community compliance." Jenna raised an eyebrow. "Compliance with what future beautification initiatives?" Victoria replied, not missing a beat. "Certain structures may not align with Lakeside Heights' long-term vision. Some are even considered potential fire risks." I looked at the barn. Weathered, sure. Flammable. It's wood, so technically yes. But a threat. "Be a shame if something happened to it before we reached a resolution," she added, writing something without looking up. I laughed nervously. Jenna didn't. Because this didn't feel like HOA business anymore. It felt like a warning. It started with a whisper on the neighborhood Facebook group. A post titled "Concerned for Our Safety" appeared at 6:42 a.m. No name, just an anonymous account using a stock photo of a golden retriever. The post read, "Rumor has it." The new residents include a former cop who left under questionable circumstances. Should we be worried about conflict of interest? The comments section exploded. Some defended us, most didn't. Victoria didn't post anything herself. She didn't have to. She just liked 3 comments in a row. Makes you wonder what they're hiding in that old barn. How did she get that job anyway? "We need transparency." I showed Jenna the thread. She didn't flinch, but her jaw tightened. That night, someone dropped an unsigned letter in our mailbox. On the back was a single sentence typed in bold, "We see everything in Lakeside Heights." And somehow, I didn't think it was metaphorical. At 2:17 a.m., I woke up to the motion alert from our driveway cam. The footage glitched. Static. Then black. I pulled on a hoodie, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped outside. The air was damp and the gravel crunched just a little too loud beneath my feet. Then I saw them footprints in the soft dirt, deep, fresh, circling the barn. The lock on the side gate hanging loose. The latch bent. Someone had tried to get in. Next to the barn wall, I spotted a cigarette butt still warm and a scuffed boot mark facing our back porch. We called the non-emergency line, filed a report. But, before the officer even arrived, Victoria was already at our front gate robe over her pajamas, fake concern on her face. Oh my, I saw flashing lights and thought someone was causing trouble. Hope everything's okay? She smiled like a cat at a birdcage. And in that moment, I knew. She wasn't watching us. She was orchestrating this. Three days later, the notices started. Folded neatly, slipped under our door, taped to our fence, emailed twice. Violation number 1. Laundry line visible from the street. Violation number 2. Improper grass blade, height exceeds 3.5 inches. Violation number 3 barn, exterior not matching HOA color palette. Violation number 4. Improper placement of gardening tools during daytime hours. Each one more absurd than the last, like they were reaching. The funniest non-regulation wind chimes. Wind chimes. I almost laughed. Jenna didn't. Paper trail, she said, tossing the latest notice on the counter. They're building a case, and if we react the wrong way, they win. That night, we caught a man crouching near our trash cans. When we stepped outside, he bolted into a black SUV with no plates. The next morning, another violation was posted. Failure to properly conceal refuse bins during off-collection hours. It wasn't just HOA pressure anymore, it was harassment. Documented, dressed up, and delivered with a smile. Monday morning, Jenna's phone buzzed. The caller ID read District Command. She stepped into the hallway to answer. When she came back, her face was pale and her jaw was clenched. Someone filed a formal complaint, she said flatly. Anonymous, alleging abuse of authority and improper boundary with a civilian investigation. I blinked. You mean? Us? She nodded. Internal Affairs was opening a preliminary review. She was instructed to refrain from involvement in any HOA matters until it concluded. No badge, no leverage, just suspicion. That same afternoon, a new thread popped up in the neighborhood forum. Should public officials be allowed to police their own backyard, and who liked the post first? Victoria Harlow. Of course. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was strategy. Slow, surgical, and now, institutional. The next HOA meeting was supposed to be routine. Plastic chairs, lukewarm coffee, passive-aggressive potluck snacks. But then Victoria stood up, heels clicking against the floor like a judge walking to the bench, and cleared her throat with theatrical precision. I moved to introduce a resolution. She began requiring immediate inspection of any structure older than 25 years for potential safety violations. And security risks. Her eyes didn't scan the room. They locked on me. And she continued, any homeowner refusing inspection may be subject to accelerated enforcement and community-wide notification. For transparency. There were murmurs, awkward glances. Someone actually clapped. I looked around the room. Our new neighbors' faces uncertain, not hostile, just hesitant. And there she was. Victoria sitting down slowly, crossing her legs, that damn clipboard resting like a sword on her lap. Jenna leaned in. She's not hiding anymore, she whispered. She wants the whole room to know exactly who she's after. Jimmy Rodriguez, our next-door neighbor. Retired Army, the kind of guy who mows his lawn like it's a military operation, pulled me aside while I was grabbing the mail. Blake, he said, voice low. You being watched? I raised an eyebrow. Every night this week, he continued, same guy, hoodie, leaning on a lamppost across the street, pretending to scroll his phone, but always watching your house. I swallowed hard. You sure? Jimmy nodded. Saw him take photos, real quick, flash off. SUV with no plates picks him up at exactly 2:15 a.m. Every time. That night I stayed up. At 2:13 a.m., there he was. Not HOA, not a nosy neighbor. This was something else. He looked straight at the security camera, smirked. Next morning, another violation notice appeared, folded neatly. No envelope. Excessive nighttime lighting causing visual disturbance to the community. That's when Jenna said it out loud. They're not trying to get us to comply. They're trying to break us. Tuesday morning, Jenna was off-duty, hair in a messy bun, wearing an old college sweatshirt, sipping coffee like a civilian. Then, knock, 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 that unmistakable rhythm of Victoria's heels. "Good morning," she chirped, not even waiting for a reply. "Per HOA Regulation 12.3b. I'm requesting immediate access to your barn for inspection." Jenna blinked, without notice or legal documentation. "It's urgent," Victoria said, her eyes hard now. "The community has concerns about what might be stored in there." Then, like a magician playing her final card, Victoria pulled out her phone. "I'm reporting obstruction of community oversight," she said, dialing. "This is Victoria Harlow, HOA Enforcement Liaison. Please dispatch officers." 10 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. Jenna stood quietly on the porch, arms crossed. The officer stepped out, looked around, then saluted. "Chief." Victoria's face turned sheet white. "And Jenna." She stepped forward, badge on her hip, voice cool as ice. "I believe you just made a false report to law enforcement. Let's discuss that, shall we?" The look on Victoria's face. "Worth every HOA violation we ever got." Victoria froze. The officer shifted uncomfortably, glanced between Jenna and her, then quietly stepped aside. Jenna didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She opened her notebook like clockwork. "Ma'am, I'm documenting your statement for record. You knowingly filed a false report against a public official, which, by the way, is a criminal offense in this county." Victoria's lips parted, but no sound came out. Just a dry swallow and a twitch in her eyebrow. The neighbors had started peeking out their windows. One actually filmed it from their porch. 10 minutes later, Victoria turned on her heel, muttered something about miscommunication, and stormed off to her BMW. But before she drove away, she paused, rolled down the window, and said quietly, calm, controlled, like it wasn't even personal, "You've just made this unnecessarily difficult. Some of us don't lose gracefully." Then she smiled. A different kind of smile this time. Not fake, not forced. Calculated. Cold. Jenna closed her notebook and whispered, "She's not done. She's just changed the game." By the next morning, the HOA Facebook group had exploded. Post after post. All concerned residents asking innocent questions like, should our police chief be involved in neighborhood disputes? Is it ethical for someone under investigation to still be in charge? Most were anonymous. Some were real names. But the language, it was surgical. Accusations dressed as curiosity. Paranoia wrapped in professionalism. Screenshots appeared taken out of context. An old photo of Jenna at a barbecue in uniform was now being circulated with captions like, "Too friendly with locals to be neutral." Even worse, someone had emailed local news stations. Within hours, we were the center of a tiny suburban scandal with a very big reach. Victoria, she hadn't posted anything, but someone noticed she liked every single comment questioning Jenna's integrity. By 3:00 p.m., Jenna's captain called. "Stay away from HOA matters until internal affairs clears you," he said. "We're getting pressure." Jenna sat on the couch, silent, phone in hand. And I realized Victoria didn't need truth to win. She just needed noise. And she'd just turned the volume all the way up. Jenna came home that evening and walked straight past me into the kitchen. No words, just silence. The kind that makes you feel like breathing too loud might shatter her. She sat at the table and just stared at her badge. Not angry, not crying, just tired in a way I'd never seen before. 20 years, she whispered. 20 years building a name clean, and one HOA queen with a Facebook group might destroy it all. That's when it hit me. Not the politics, not the property, but what this was doing to her. And I realized Victoria wasn't just attacking our land. She was trying to erase her dignity, her service, her pride. Jenna walked in that night quieter than usual. She didn't slam the door, didn't even sigh. She just sat at the kitchen table and stared into her tea like it was supposed to fix something. 20 years, building a clean record, she whispered, voice barely holding. and one HOA gossip campaign could erase it overnight. I wanted to say something brave, something husband-like, but I just stood there, because for the first time I saw it. Not anger, not frustration, exhaustion, the weight of duty, betrayal, and justice all behind her eyes. And that was the moment I stopped treating this like a nuisance. This wasn't just a Karen problem, this was war. That night I couldn't sleep. Jenna was curled up on the couch, still in her uniform, eyes shut, but fists clenched like even in dreams she was bracing for the next hit. I stepped outside, needing air, needing purpose. That's when I saw the motion light flicker near the barn. Someone had been here. Not a raccoon, not wind. Tire tracks, footprints, fresh. I felt a cold knot twist in my stomach. This wasn't paranoia, this was surveillance. "They're coming for us," I muttered, "and they're not playing by the rules." At sunrise, I made 3 calls, one to Jimmy, one to the county records office, and one to myself. It was time to stop reacting and start fighting back, not just for Jenna, not just for the barn, but for everything we stood to lose. I drove to the county records office. What I was looking for, I wasn't sure. Maybe zoning complaints, maybe violations. What I found made my blood run cold. There, buried under a stack of recent filings, was a permit application, under my name, a request to convert our barn into a temporary commercial storage facility. Signed, dated, approved. Only I never signed it. The signature looked close. The slant was right, the loops nearly perfect. But I know my name, and I never authorized anything of the sort. The supporting documents were even more polished: environmental impact reports, truck route maps, even an outline for 24-hour operation plans. Whoever filed this didn't just forge my name, they built an entire fake project in advance. That meant only one thing: Victoria had planned this before we moved in, and if she'd gone this far on paper, what else had already been set in motion behind our backs? Back home, I opened my laptop and started digging property records, business registries, LLC databases. I typed in Victoria Harlow, and then I fell into a rabbit hole. She wasn't just on the HOA board. She was listed as CEO or managing partner in 3 different companies: Evertrail Logistics, OLC VHX, Property Solutions. Harlow, Civic Advisors, all clean, all vague, all based in other states. Each one shared similar language: consulting, community integration, infrastructure support. Translation, cover-ups. I matched dates and locations. Each time a company of hers appeared near a suburban neighborhood, strange things followed: zoning changes, fast-tracked permits, and then silence. The addresses were fake. Some companies were registered to mailbox centers. One was linked to a P.O. box in Buffalo, New York. And the clincher, all 3 had transaction records tied to properties with access to secondary transport roads, just like ours. Jenna leaned over my shoulder. "Nathan, this isn't a dispute, this is an operation." Friday night, our backyard camera glitched again. Not a random error. All 4 feeds went black at exactly 2:03 a.m., stayed down for 12 minutes, then flicked back on like nothing had happened. But the front porch camera, still recording, and it caught something. A red laser flash. Quick, barely a blink. A lens scrambler. Someone had walked the property line with military-grade equipment specifically to disable our security system. Jenna checked the footage frame by frame. There, a shadow hunched low, moving fast. Black hoodie, baseball cap, carrying what looked like a toolkit and something longer, maybe a crowbar. They circled the barn, examined the hinges, and then vanished. No forced entry, no stolen items, just a message: "We can get in any time." I looked at Jenna. She didn't speak. She just opened a locked drawer, pulled out her old duty sidearm, and set it on the table. Next time, she said, "I'm not waiting for footage. I'm waiting at the door." The next morning, I noticed something odd near the back corner of the barn. deep scratches on the wooden floorboards like something had been dragged or moved repeatedly. I pulled up the slats. Underneath a rusted metal ring. I tugged. A hidden hatch creaked open, coughing up 50 years of dust and cold air. Jenna grabbed a flashlight. We descended slowly, steps echoing down stone stairs that had no business existing beneath a suburban backyard. What we found below wasn't just a cellar, it was a tunnel, narrow, reinforced, old, stone walls, support beams, hand-chiseled markings, and tracks modern ones, fresh boot prints in the dust, deep grooves from wheels. Jenna looked around, stunned. "This isn't a hiding spot," she said. "It's a road. We followed it for 30 yards until it branched into a wider chamber. Broken crates, scuff marks, and something that chilled me. A laminated map, with our property at the center, labeled Phase 2 Active. That night we tore the barn apart. Not out of panic, out of instinct. My grandfather built this place board by board. If anyone had hidden answers, it was him. Behind the oak bookshelf, third shelf from the top exactly where he always kept his old farming almanacs, I felt something shift. A hollow panel. Inside a metal box, rusted but locked tight. I opened it, hands trembling. Inside were documents. A hand-drawn map of our property marked with symbols and coded labels, and a letter, written in my grandfather's neat, looping handwriting. "Nathan, if you're reading this, then someone's finally come for the land. The tunnel you found once helped slaves reach freedom. Now it could be used for the opposite. Don't let that happen." There were legal documents, too, provisions in his will tied to federal preservation laws triggered only if the land came under external threat. Jenna held up the map and whispered, "He didn't just build a barn. He built a defense plan, for decades in advance." And in that moment, we stopped feeling like victims. We started feeling like guardians. By Sunday morning, Jenna had made up her mind. "I'm done waiting for the system," she said. "If they're building a criminal network on our land, then we build the case to tear it down." She picked up her phone and called someone I'd only heard about in stories. Detective Ray Morrison, financial crimes specialist, former federal investigator, Jenna's most trusted contact from her state policing days. By 2 p.m., Morrison was sitting at our kitchen table with a laptop, a notebook, and an expression that said, "No patience for nonsense." We laid it all out, the forged permit, the tunnel, the LLCs, the trucks, the surveillance footage, the anonymous posts. Morrison didn't flinch. He just said calmly, "You're not dealing with a nosy neighbor. You're sitting on a multi-state logistics operation." He clicked open a document, started typing. "We'll trace the money first. Shell companies leave trails, and if Victoria's involved in what I think she is..." He looked up. "She's not just abusing HOA power, she's laundering millions." And with that, the investigation officially began. Morrison worked fast. By Monday morning, he had overlaid satellite maps, transportation grids, and county zoning records. Our property, a bullseye. 3 old farm roads, all privately owned with invisible access to 2 state highways, one leading to the Canadian border, one south toward Mexico. Combine that with the hidden tunnel beneath our barn. It was the perfect node in a larger network. "They're not just moving cargo," Morrison explained, pointing to pins on a digital map. "They're bypassing federal inspection routes. Your barn is a mid-route depot." He zoomed in. "There's similar activity near Detroit, Buffalo, and El Paso, all locations Victoria's shell companies have touched. Every dot on the map had something in common. Isolated rural land. Old infrastructure and HOA cover stories. She's disguising international logistics as local neighborhood enforcement," he said. My stomach dropped. Jenna looked over and muttered, "We're not up against a rogue neighbor. We're inside a pipeline, and if we didn't move fast, we'd be the next ones buried beneath it." Wednesday morning, 7:06 a.m. I stepped outside and froze. Victoria Harlow was standing in our driveway. Not in her usual HOA getup today, she wore a charcoal blazer and blood-red lipstick. Flanking her were two men in dark suits, stone-faced, silent, out of place in suburbia. "Mr. Blake," she called out, cheerful like a realtor. "We'd like to discuss a resolution to your property situation." She held up a leather folder. Inside, a purchase offer 3 times our land's value, cash immediate closing. Jenna stepped beside me. "Not for sale," she said flatly. Victoria's smile didn't flinch. "You're passionate. I admire that. But you're standing in the way of something much bigger than a chicken coop and family memories." Then she leaned in, her voice, dropping "refuse this offer." "And things get messier. Not for me, of course. I'm just the polite version." She turned heels, clicking on the driveway like punctuation. I looked at Jenna. She just made a mob move. And Jenna replied, "Then it's time to call the feds." That afternoon, Morrison called a closed-door meeting at a secured location just outside city limits. Jenna and I arrived with files, flash drives, and the leather folder Victoria left behind like a calling card. Waiting inside, 2 federal agents from Homeland Security, 1 DOJ liaison, and a financial crimes auditor who looked like he hadn't blinked since 2003. Morrison started the briefing. "We have interstate fraud, forged permits, illicit transport infrastructure, and a likely connection to international smuggling." He laid out the map. Each red dot now had names, dates, and financial paper trails. At the center, Lakeside Heights. Victoria Harlow has ties to 6 shell companies and 3 confirmed logistics fronts operating across state lines. One agent added, "There's chatter connecting her to an operation we've been tracking for years. Codename Northern Chain." Another leaned forward. "If you two hadn't documented this so precisely, we wouldn't have the legal leverage to move. But now we're initiating surveillance, asset tracking, and pre-indictment prep." Then he looked at Jenna. "Chief Ashford, you ready to step back into duty?" Jenna didn't blink. "Not just ready. I've been waiting." And with that, Victoria Harlow's clock officially started ticking. Friday, just before dawn, it happened. 3 unmarked black SUVs rolled into Lakeside Heights like shadows with engines. No sirens, no announcements. Just synchronized movement, 4 houses, 1 goal. Federal agents in plain clothes exited like clockwork, split into teams, and began executing coordinated search warrants. One house, just 2 streets over, belonged to a man Victoria once called a distant cousin who helped with paperwork. Turns out he was managing logistics contracts linked to Victoria's shell companies. And not just on paper. Inside his garage, boxes labeled as garden supplies. Inside, high-end electronics, pharmaceuticals, and sealed cash bundles. At another property empty for months, agents found stacked crates identical to those used in warehouse smuggling busts near Buffalo. No one screamed. No one ran. But the neighborhood watched. Windows cracked open, phones filming from behind blinds. Victoria absent. Not home, not reachable. But we knew. She felt the tremor. Because this was the first fracture in her carefully crafted empire. That night, Morrison called us. "She's cracking," he said. "Interrogation's begun. And she's talking." Victoria had been arrested at a private airfield just outside the state line. No luggage, 1 passport, a briefcase full of burner phones, and an encrypted flash drive. Under pressure and facing a mountain of evidence, she began to confess. Not just about the forged permits, not just the laundering, but something darker. Her husband. The man whose death had been ruled an accident years ago. He found out, she told agents. He was going to expose everything. I had no choice. Cold, calculated, unapologetic. It was business. Losing him was more manageable than losing the pipeline. Jenna sat in stunned silence as Morrison relayed this. I stared at the wall, fists clenched. Because this wasn't about a neighborhood dispute anymore. It wasn't even just about our land. It was about a woman who built an empire on lies, fear, and a body. And now, the empire was finally collapsing. Days after Victoria's arrest, Jimmy showed up at our door again, this time with a manila folder and a grim look. I ran every name listed on the HOA board, he said. Every single one. Out of 7 members, 3 had moved away over a year ago. 2 never lived in the neighborhood. 1 was dead. The last A name used on multiple HOA filings, but no trace of a real person behind it. Jimmy looked up. Nathan. The board was fake. She invented it. That's how she passed resolutions. That's how she issued fines. That's how she justified surveillance zoning changes, even emergency inspections, all rubber-stamped by people who didn't exist. It wasn't a neighborhood association, Jenna said, stunned. It was a front, a legal disguise. The realization was like a slap. Every warning, every notice, every rule we tried to follow came from a ghost government, built to break people quietly. And now it was time to burn the costume. A week later, we stood in front of our barn with 3 federal preservation officers, a state historian, and a legal rep from the Department of the Interior. They weren't here for an investigation. They were here for a designation. Based on Grandpa's letter, the documented history of the Underground Railroad tunnels, and the recent discovery of active infrastructure being exploited for crime. Our land had been approved as a National Historic Site. It wasn't just symbolic. It meant no commercial development, full federal oversight, and legal protection that couldn't be undone by any HOA or private entity, real or fake. Jenna signed the papers. I watched the sun hit the side of that weathered barn and thought about how close we came to losing it. Not just the building, but what it stood for. Your grandfather didn't just build it for farming, the preservation officer said. He built it to last beyond corruption, and now it was finally safe, permanently. 6 months later, the barn stood taller than ever. Fresh paint reinforced beams, but the soul of it untouched. We didn't turn it into storage. We turned it into a story. Inside, now, sits a small museum, a timeline of the Underground Railroad artifacts from Grandpa's hidden records. A display dedicated to exposing how power can be abused in plain sight. Students come. Tourists wander through. Neighbors, former skeptics, now volunteer on weekends. As for Lakeside Heights, we helped draft a new HOA charter. Transparent, community-run, 0 loopholes. Jenna was asked to chair the new board. She politely declined. I think I'll stick with fighting real crime, she smiled. And me, I built a bench beside the barn with a plaque that reads, "Some legacies are meant to be defended, others exposed." And every time I sit there, I remember. We didn't just win, we restored something worth keeping. Sometimes the greatest threats don't wear masks or break down doors. They smile, they wave. They attend HOA meetings and speak in polite tones while rewriting the rules beneath your feet. What happened to us isn't just our story. It's a reminder that truth, legacy, and quiet courage matter. That good people, when cornered, can still stand tall. That standing your ground doesn't mean shouting, it means holding on when every system tells you to let go. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone who's fought for what's right quietly but relentlessly, share it with them. Leave us a comment. We read every one. And if you'd like to hear more true stories that cut through the noise, tap subscribe or give this video a gentle thumbs up. From our family to yours, thank you for listening, for seeing the bigger picture, and for remembering that sometimes what we protect says more than what we build.